of Money with Santosh Sirur.
Hello and welcome to another super episode of The Sound of Money. This is a 2023 year starter, and I would also say obviously a 2022 year ender. When I spoke to Madan Sabnavis, who happened to be my first guest in 2020 on The Sound of Money, at that point in time, we were in the midst of the pandemic and there was pretty much gloom everywhere. But today, when we talk in 2022 end and beginning of 23 and years ahead, I realize that it's going to be quite a year ahead for India and years ahead for India. So joining me on this panel and a very special discussion, of course, is Madan Sabnavis, who is the chief economist with the Bank of Baroda. And also with us on this show is Mr. Udaya Kumar Hebbar, who is the MD and CEO of Grameen Access Bank, which is, of course, he too has been on one of my shows earlier. And today we're going to have this panel discussion where we're going to talk about India ahead. Now, whether it is 5 years, 50 years, 100 years ahead, well, that's something fate will decide. But in this last year, we've seen India coming out of the pandemic. At least nobody wears a mask in India now on. That's a great sign that pandemic is off. But at the same time, we see the GDP numbers, the growth story in terms of the China plus one, as they call, and probably the most important aspect being a very stable government, right, at the center, is a sign that it's good. Whether it's good or not good is what we're going to discuss, and the years ahead for India. So, first question to you, Madan. Where do you think is India heading in terms of its growth story?
Thanks, Santosh. In fact, I think India is probably better placed than other countries in terms of the future. The reason being that the current global recession, which has already started in the West and will probably percolate to other countries also in 2023. So that's what the prognosis of the IMF is. I think with India growing even to the region of around 6 to 6.5%, which is what we believe will happen in 2023, is definitely a good state to be in. So in terms of pure numbers, I think the Indian economy will be a better position next year and the years to come. But the only caveat here is that we need to get certain things in order to make sure that there is acceleration in future. So when I say getting things in order, it's primarily, I think there are two issues which have been nagging us even before the pandemic came in. One is growth in consumption, and the second one is growth in investment. We've seen the investment rate being fairly flat in the region of around 27 to 29% in the last 5 to 6 years. And contrast this to something like 33, 34% we had in the years of 2010 till maybe around 2013, 2014. So that is something which has to revive, for which we have the animal spirits in the private sector, which has to do the heavy lifting. The government is doing a lot of support on its side. It's the central government's capex, but I think it's only a drop in the ocean. The primary push has to come from the private sector. And the second thing, of course, is that consumption is something which has to revive. When I say consumption, I need to have more people spending money, which means people need to have higher income. And to get higher income, we need to have more jobs created. There should be relevant kind of jobs, not things like Zomato delivery boys who do not earn a very good enough income to add to the overall consumption spiral. So I think we need to crack these two things to really see accelerated growth, which goes back to say that we need to focus on job creation. I think that's the only way out for India, so that we can move from 6.5% to the trajectory of around 7 to 8% growth in the years to come.
Yeah. So there, do you agree with the view that Madan has? What has been, from your lens of, you see the rural, aspects of India, the Bharat, as they say. So what is your view on this?
I largely agree with what Madan says. Top of that, probably the opportunity perspective, the young population, educated population, which is one of the large advantage for India.
Yeah.
And similarly, the GDP, debt to GDP is quite comfortable and low compared to many countries in the world, which has a requirement of putting rural more money in the hands of the people, like what is this creation of job, which actually pushes the growth, pushes the consumption, everything, which is probably the most important today. So to give one example, the gap between the GDP between the urban and rural is quite contrast actually. GDP comes from urban is about 53%, and then from rural is about 47%. Unfortunately, the credit 90% credit supply happening to urban, whereas only 10% credit happening to the rural, which is there's a big credit gap in the rural. The more and more supply of credit to rural will definitely, support the GDP what rural is giving to the country. So I think that a huge credit supply need to go to rural, which will definitely give a large support to the country going forward, which is probably consciously one has to do. Consciously, government and the regulator and the sector, whether it's private or public, everybody has to put efforts on that, which will further add to what we are planning about the next of what you call growth story of India for next decade.
Yeah. So you hit the nail, right? When you say that the credit offtake is much lesser in rural areas, what are the challenges on the ground there? Because we may not be talking of really a big ticket size credit, but volumes, right? We talk of numbers there. What are the ground level issues? Is there development an issue, or what exactly is the showstopper?
I think it is it is the journey actually. I think it started in the last one decade probably. It needs another decade to really take off. But there are a lot of regulatory challenges, the infrastructure challenges, ecosystem challenges. Today, if you see for a rural folks, for a bank transaction, or they have to go travel 5 kilometers, 15 kilometers, still that problem is there. Yeah. Or they have to spend half a day to complete their transactions, which itself is a negative for them. So those kind of issues are there. And for the lenders, like public sector bank or a private sector bank, prohibitively costly to do service in the rural area with a small ticket loans. So obviously, the infrastructure which is ecosystem which is in the rural is not sufficient to provide so much of credit at this point of time. It takes time. So it is growing. For example, I just take an example of microfinance. The microfinance as a sector was just 50,000 or 15,000 crores in March 10, is today 3 lakh crores. So which is in the last 11 years time. Yeah. So which itself is quite big. Yeah. But in the meantime, probably next 10 years, probably it will be 30 lakh crores probably. So it is catching up. I'm talking about one point in the rural delivery of credit. In the meantime, you have a two-wheeler, you have a rural housing, affordable housing is going up almost 30% CAGR growth. So I think it's taking up, but more and more regulatory support, administrative support, which will further enhance this rural credit. The more the credit, the higher the GDP. Probably it's possible because the GDP is struggling in rural, still delivering without having sufficient credit. Providing sufficient credit will probably make much more different about the current situation.
Yeah. So one area probably where I would say the urban and the rural divide probably has contracted and it is more positive is probably the digitization, because today if we talk of rural areas, pretty much everyone, at least the youngsters, at least the I come across, have access to web. So do you think digitalization or digitization, as we say, is the way forward both in the urban and the rural India? And as we know, the Reserve Bank of India has done some tremendous work in this space, in the banking space. Is that something that is a very key, I would say, a catalyst to the growth and the development of India? Maybe Madan, Udaya, you can.
Yeah, maybe because it's a continuation. I maybe Madan can add to from his point of view. Of course, it is very important, but it is still a long journey. It's still a long journey because digitization needs an ecosystem, it needs infrastructure, and you need a digital literacy. There are 3 components needed actually. So if you see from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 4, it actually changes, varies. From again, digital has another difference. Let's say smartphone. For a smartphone, is a top priority for it's a male and student and urban. So it's all put towards today. If you see, almost 3.1 310 million, 3.1 crores of population in this country doesn't have mobile. Even the feature phone, they don't have not even on feature phone in this country. So it's a journey. But when you see in urban, you are all realizing that okay, everybody doing transaction without using cash or using digital transaction. But as you go more and more to rural, it is actually not that. Everybody uses cash. So that the cash in the country almost doubled after demonetization, which itself is an example that cash is still a king. So I don't know, digitization will immediately give an impact, but it takes definitely over a period of time. Definitely, it gives a lot of support for the growth in this country, but it takes some more time. It is happening. Its journey has started, and it's growing also. But my sense, it takes a couple of years. Maybe Madan can further add.
No, I would fully agree with what Uday is saying, because while digitization is the way forward, because it won't be possible to create this kind of physical infrastructure in all the rural areas. I think public sector banks have done a great job since nationalization. So we have lots of branches, but subsequently one did realize that lots of them were not viable. So banks were left to even close on some of these branches. So I think digitization is the right way to go. But I think the points which Uday has raised are perfectly legitimate, because people need to have access to these kind of facilities, and be more important is the knowledge. I mean, I need to know whether I can really operate the mobile phone. I may be having all these devices, all these programs. I'll be able to do everything on the mobile or on the internet, maybe on the laptop. But the question is that, do I really know how to go about it? And speaking for myself, I could be considered to be a bit more literate than other people, but I still feel more confident when I go to the bank branch and conduct some of the critical transactions. Because there's always this fear that you're using something online and something doesn't happen. Whom do you go to? Because unfortunately, I think while there's been a lot of what I call progress made in terms of digitization, we've never really managed to concentrate on how do we actually provide redress to customers. And I think that's been a major problem. See, one thing is you're talking in terms of any kind of cyber crimes, that's one part of it. But the second thing is that when transactions go wrong, I mean, you call up any bank, you go to a service center, you'll keep going round in circles, you don't get an answer, and you really don't know what to do. So it's very frustrating. So therefore, I think, while it is definitely in the right direction, but I think it will take a lot more time before it becomes universally accepted. And till that point of time, I think there is still scope for physical structures to be set up. We need to have more people in the rural areas who are able to communicate and who are able to actually do this job. I'll just give you one example, because the other time when I was looking in terms of just post offices.
Yeah.
So I think the kind of connection which the post offices actually have to rural households is fairly immense. So, because they actually act as not just the person who's delivering letters, but they also give you advice. They also are able to mobilize the kind of savings, which they've been doing in a very minimal way, but it's been growing. I think that's the important part. So it's more important that you have this physical touch. That's what I think has to carry on in parallel until such time we reach that level of sophistication where we can say that digital banking will really take over.
Okay, that's interesting to know.
I think I just wanted to add. I mean,
yes, please. Yeah.
See, not only the digitization, which also has some of the issues which need to crack. Both data privacy is another issue which is not fully, democratized way. You still have a challenge of data privacy. Government has a lot of data. That's through COVID what you collected or through Aadhaar. So those data are not fully used. Actually, if you can use that data. Actually, you can create a lot of additional information system which can actually capture. So if you don't use the data, the data are getting enriched, but you are not using in the right way.
Yeah.
Still not. And one more thing, what the banks have done very well is providing access to draw your money anywhere. So, but if you look back, what I was telling you is about the conversion of cash into digital money. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
But wherever you go, you can draw the money from if you have a bank balance, you can draw from anywhere, or from a CSE or from ATM, everywhere. But when you have a cash to convert, you have to go back to your bank.
Yes.
You have to go back to your bank. You don't have option. If you convert if you think about a rural, they don't have so many opportunities actually.
True. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So coming back to Madan, on the policy front, what are the challenges you see from a policy standpoint? Let's talk a little macro. Where is the policy missing? I mean, I know labor reforms is something that been talked a lot about, but things have not moved. Which are those policies that can, somewhere one has to bite the bullet and take it ahead?
I think
according to me, Santosh.
Yeah, please, Madan.
Yeah, according to me, Santosh, I think when we're talking in terms of policy, I broadly would classify it into what affects industry and what affects agriculture. So in terms of what affects industry, I think the government has been fairly progressive. And I think this particular scheme of PLI is something which is progressive, which has the potential to actually bring about an accelerated growth in manufacturing sector. And I think we'll need to wait and see as to how far this fructifies, because the targets which have been set for companies are fairly stiff. Like you need to get a certain amount of incremental investment, incremental output, and then you get a certain kind of a subsidy in terms of like a payback. But I think in agriculture is where we require to have serious reforms, because when I say 60% of my labor force is still employed in agriculture, and we are seeing maybe a kind of a stagnant growth rate of 3 to 4%, how do I actually commercialize agriculture? I think that is the basic crux with how do I make the rural sector, which is largely farm dependent, how do I make it stronger? One is, of course, through the credit channels, which Udaya has spoken of. But the other thing is also, how do I make sure that agriculture becomes more viable? And I think the farm laws, which were there, I always go back to the farm laws, saying the farm laws were very, very progressive, which were trying to commercialize agriculture. But then you have a lot of politics which comes in. And of course, in a democracy, you can't shun aside the politics of it. You need to take everybody along. But I think we need to make sure that farmers actually look upon their job. You get in through this thing of contract farming, sell wherever you want to, where you get the highest prices. I think that is the way to really go to make sure that India becomes a hub of agriculture. Just look at it. India is, because of our size, we are the largest producer of several crops. So why is it that we are not setting prices across the globe? We should be a large export market. In fact, we should be exporting it. The fact is that because of the systems which are there, and there are, of course, things which have come since independence time, they are vested interests, we need to crack them. But I think that's what the government should really focus on. And now that we have a strong government, and I think it's shown repeatedly that it's winning all the elections in all the states at national level, I think this should be taken on a strong footing, because it's an initiative which came from the government. I mean, as I said, politics is not very easy to divorce from it. You need to go slowly on it. But I think if we're able to make agriculture a bit more stronger, which is possible through the farm laws, I think we can make a big difference there.
Yeah. What's your view on this, Uday, on the policy front?
I think everything what Madan said is quite important. Maybe in the same way, additional focus if we can create on education, health, and skill building. These three are again, lacking to a certain extent. For additional allocation or additional push for these three areas will further enhance the situation.
Yeah. On my next question actually is on the geopolitics of it, right? India is in a pretty sweet spot, as we all know. The China plus one or so, or many other, the growth story itself. Do you think in the event there is much progress on the West or the war front, India will continue to be in the sweet spot it shows to be?
No, actually, Santosh, I have a different view here. I think we've always been saying that can India replace China? You remember the time when we had that trade war when Donald Trump was the president of US? It was largely felt that, look, can India really replace China? Because US is taking action against China. But I think that may be tending towards hubris, I think, because I've not really seen India's exports or India able to dominate the global stage when it comes to exports in any significant manner. And it's primarily because of the composition of exports. You must them have traditional goods. And when they're traditional goods, we are actually competing with countries which also have cheaper labor, like Bangladesh, Vietnam, Pakistan. So I don't think we've managed to take that kind of an advantage. So again, when I go back to the PLI scheme, the whole aim is to try and make sure that if my goods become more competitive, both in terms of quality as well as price, we could be manage to make inroads into the global sphere. But right now, I think it's definitely a dream. It's a challenge. I think we're working towards it, but I don't think we're anywhere close to saying that we can really replace China. We need to hold on to our exports. Let's look at it. Today, we're talking of a recession in the West. My exports have fallen. They've started falling. So we should actually have a situation where we should be immune to whatever happens even at a global level. So I think we are a long distance away from that.
Yeah, I know that do you concur with what Madan has to say?
Absolutely, I concur with that. I think China is currently probably, while we cannot replace China, but we can, India could be continuously an alternative to China. If we can see the more and more uncertainties inside China, probably pushing the investments into India, which further enhances the opportunity for India. Of course, we need to have a right policies for exports, right policies to low cost productions, so which will definitely help. But there is a global view towards India as an alternative to China is developing. Probably that will further help us.
Yeah, okay.
But Santosh, we don't mind here, since we're talking of it, yes, I did not talk about investment. Definitely, we have seen an increase in the foreign direct investment which has come to India. Yeah. But is it anywhere close to the scale of what we have seen in China? The answer is no. I think here also we need to clear up our policies. See, very often when we are talking of government policies, we only refer to the central government. But unfortunately, the way we are structured, ours is a federal structure. So I think there are lots of weak points which are there, because if you want to do business in India, if you talk to most of the foreign investors, they still say India is a difficult country to do it. And for example, just look at it, even in terms of enforcement of what you call your contracts, it's a major headache for almost everyone. And even if you look at the way in which the investment comes into India, it's generally in the service sector. You don't want to get into sectors which have any kind of regulation. Yeah. Now, I don't want to get into the details of the Vodafone case, whether who is right or wrong. The court has, of course, adjudicated. But as a foreign investor, you say, I don't want to get into a place where the laws change suddenly, regulation changes, and suddenly there's a penalty put on me, and it becomes unviable for me to do business. So I think that is something which has to be tackled on a war footing, which cannot be just done by the center. You'll also have to take the states along.
Yeah. Yeah, we are short on time, but I definitely like a 30-second answer from each of you on the India startup, ecosystem. Where do you think we are heading, and are we in the right direction? Yeah, maybe Udaya.
Yeah, I think we are one of the fast moving in terms of startup, and I think if you look at the global space, India has been watched as one of the hub in terms of startup. Not only in India, the Indians who are in different geographies really making much impact in this direction. I think we are in the right place in terms of startup progress.
Yeah, okay.
Santosh, I have a different view on startups, because globally it has been seen that within 4 or 5 years, 80% of startups normally wind up. They fail. Yeah. If you look at India, I don't really have data out here to talk, because I think recently in the parliament, a question was raised that we do have one of the largest number of startups. But just look at I would judge the startups on the basis of the IPOs which have come out, and most of them have been tremendous flops. True. So I have a feeling that while there's a lot of entrepreneurship which is there, we have very fresh engineers, management graduates who prefer to do things on their own. But I think most of these models are very micro in nature. They're not able to scale up. And the model which has been followed normally is that, look, I start a good enterprise, it looks very nice, I have a lot of people having faith in it, I sell it off partly to someone, we have an IPO, I make my money, I get out of it, but then what happens later on, the investors are left with the losses. So I think one has to be a bit careful out here, and I think this probably happens whenever there's a new phenomenon, where there's a lot of crowding in of entrepreneurs who come in. And finally, if you look at the survivors who actually live to grow their organizations, that number becomes really a handful.
Absolutely.
It is 90 to 10, Madan, in India, not 80. Failure is 90.
on that note, I think it's time, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this edition of The Sound of Money. As we all know, India is, it's called the India's ABC, right? Assertive, bold, and very confident. On that note, let's hope India, travels on that growth engine and way ahead. And good to have you once again on this edition of the special episode of The Sound of Money. So Udaya Kumar and Madan Sabnavis, thank you once again for joining on this episode of The Sound of Money.
Thanks a lot, Santosh.
Thank you.
Sure. Bye. And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of The Sound of Money. Hope to catch you in 2023 with tons and tons of episodes, all talking about your sound of money. Thank you and take care. Bye-bye.
Sound of Money with Santosh Sirur.